All right, so today we're going to be diving into something pretty important for travelers,
Hmm.
especially for Black travelers, and that
I
is
understand.
potential challenges you might face in certain countries.
Right.
Based on this article we found called The Top 10 Countries Where Black People May Not Feel Welcome. So, just right off the bat, important to say this is one article, right? This is not
That's a one lens. Yeah.
the end-all be-all of travel advice.
Yeah. It's a starting point.
It's just about awareness.
Yeah, for sure. It's not like super in-depth research or anything. It's just
Yeah.
a perspective.
Exactly. So, we're not trying to like scare anybody off from
Right.
going anywhere.
No, not at all.
But it's good to kind of have that awareness in your back pocket when you're packing your
Yeah.
passport.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the article starts off with India. Okay, so
Right.
India, we know, beautiful country, tons of history,
Yeah.
the food, the culture, all that. The thing is, India has like a centuries-old presence of people of African descent, and yet anti-Black sentiment exists there.
Yeah. And this is where you get into like colorism and things like that.
Oh, interesting.
You know what I mean? It's not just about being black or white. It's about like
Right.
shades of skin color
And within certain communities.
within different communities.
Yeah.
And, you might find that people with darker skin tones,
Yeah.
even within their own ethnic groups, might face more prejudice and stuff.
Interesting. Okay, so next we have Japan. Okay, so
Right.
Japan, famously polite, hospitable.
Sure.
However, Black travelers have reported feeling isolated
Right.
and even discriminated against or just stared at constantly.
Right. Which I think is a really interesting point because it shows that
Yeah.
even in a place that is known for being so welcoming,
Yes.
if there is a lack of diversity
Yeah.
and if there is not a good understanding of other cultures
Right.
that can create kind of unintentional barriers.
Yes, it's just like a lack of exposure in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, so moving on, we have Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
Saudi Arabia,
Hmm.
known for its strict laws and customs.
Mm-hmm.
And the article specifically points to the cultural perceptions and
Yeah.
legal restriction that could be challenging for Black travelers.
Yeah. And this brings up a really interesting point because
Yes.
in different cultures, there are different cultural norms and values.
Totally.
And sometimes those values and norms intersect with perceptions of race in different ways.
Absolutely.
So I think it's really important for travelers to
Yeah.
understand that just because something's acceptable in one culture doesn't mean it's going to
Right.
be acceptable in another.
Absolutely. It's all about being like sensitive and having
Yeah.
respect for those differences.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so next we have South Korea. South Korea, very technologically advanced,
Yep.
fast-paced society.
Yeah.
But the article highlights that there's a lack of understanding regarding Black culture
Interesting.
and even some instances of microaggression that have been reported.
It's really interesting how
Yeah.
these biases can still exist in a society
Right.
that is rapidly globalizing.
Yeah.
So it's really important for everybody to understand that just
Yeah.
because a society is rapidly changing and
Yeah.
becoming more globalized, that doesn't mean that deeply ingrained biases
Yeah.
disappear overnight.
Yeah. Okay, so from the fast-paced world of South Korea, we're going to go to Ukraine, which is known for its beautiful landscapes
Beautiful.
and history.
Yeah.
However, there are reports of rising nationalism.
Oh.
And unfortunately, this rising nationalism seems to be impacting Black individuals negatively.
This is a really interesting thing because you see this trend globally,
Yeah.
where you see this rise of nationalism. And
Mhm.
sometimes that nationalism can
Yeah.
create a more difficult situation
Yeah.
for travelers, especially travelers from minority groups.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just being mindful of that, I
Yeah.
think, is very important. Okay, so next we have Israel, a country very rich in history and religious significance.
Yes.
But the article calls out the challenges faced by specifically African asylum seekers.
Right.
So we're talking about the intersection of race, nationality, and immigration status.
Yeah, and this just shows how complicated it is,
Yeah.
because the way that you are treated when you travel
Right.
can be significantly impacted by what's happening globally
Yeah.
and by the social attitudes towards specific groups.
Totally.
It's not always about the country itself.
Right.
Sometimes it's about the larger context in which you're traveling.
Absolutely. Okay, so next up we have two very popular tourist destinations, Italy and Greece.
Yes.
Famous for their art, history, food, all that.
Gorgeous places.
But Black travelers have reported experiencing some bias.
Really?
especially in smaller towns where there may not be as much diversity.
So this is really interesting, right? Because it shows that even in places that are world-renowned for their beauty and historical significance,
Right.
there are still underlying social dynamics and perceptions
Yeah.
that can impact individual experiences.
Yeah.
So it's just a reminder that even if a country is considered welcoming overall,
Yes.
there can be these like nuances,
Right.
variations within different regions.
Absolutely. Okay. Next, we have Russia. Vast country, complex history.
Yeah.
The article points out that in areas with less cultural diversity, the atmosphere
Okay.
can be unwelcoming for Black travelers.
Okay.
And there have even been some reports of discrimination and violence.
Wow. So that really kind of underscores the importance of doing your research
Yeah.
before you travel.
Yeah.
I mean, and not just like booking your flights and hotels, but really understanding
Yeah.
a country's social and political landscape
Right.
so that you can make informed decisions about
Oh, sure.
where you want to go and how you might need to like
Yeah.
navigate certain situations.
Absolutely. Okay, and then we have China. China experiencing rapid growth, huge player on the world stage.
Mm-hmm.
But Black travelers have reported facing some discrimination and stereotypes,
Interesting.
which seem to stem from a lack of understanding of Black culture.
It's just so interesting how even in a world that's becoming
Right.
increasingly more and more interconnected,
Right.
that these cultural barriers and these preconceived notions
Yeah.
can still persist.
Totally.
So it really highlights the need for more open-mindedness
Absolutely.
and willingness to like challenge our own assumptions.
For sure. For sure. Okay, and last but not least, we have Turkey.
Right.
Turkey, beautiful country, known for its rich cultural tapestry.
Beautiful. Yeah.
But the article reports racial prejudice and discrimination,
Interesting.
particularly in the more rural areas of the country.
Yeah. Which again, it just connects back to the idea that
Yeah.
even in countries with the history of diversity,
Yeah.
you can still have these pockets of intolerance and prejudice. So it's really important to be aware of regional differences within a country
Right.
and not just the overall national reputation.
Absolutely.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's about those like little nuances. Right?
Yeah, nuances, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
So we've gone through this whole list of 10 countries. I know it's a lot to take in. But I think the important thing here is not to feel afraid to travel.
Exactly, yeah. It's
Yeah.
not about like canceling all your travel plans.
Right.
It's just about being thoughtful and prepared.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't go on a hike without checking the weather first
Right.
and bringing the right gear.
Right.
When you're traveling, it's a good idea to do your research
Yeah.
and be prepared.
Absolutely.
So just adding that extra layer of
Right.
preparation to your travel experience.
I love that. Yeah. It's
Absolutely.
about that thoughtful awareness, right?
Yeah.
And also realizing that these reports are not like universal truths, right?
Yeah.
Like every traveler will have a different experience.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and that's what makes travel so enriching.
Yeah.
Is that you're going to have all these different encounters. You're going to engage with different perspectives.
Yeah.
And it's about being open to those different experiences.
Absolutely.
But I think it's also really important to acknowledge
Yeah.
that who we are and where we come from shapes our experiences
Yes,
when
absolutely.
we travel.
I think a lot of people listening right now are probably like, okay, that's really interesting,
Yeah.
but what does it actually mean for me? Like,
Right.
how can I be better prepared
Totally.
if I want to travel to one of these countries? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just doing your research.
Yeah.
And going beyond the typical like travel blogs and tourist guides
Right.
and really seeking out diverse voices
Yes.
and perspectives from specifically, Black travelers
Yeah.
who have visited these countries.
Right.
Because I think their insights are super valuable in terms of painting a more complete picture.
Absolutely. So like travel bloggers, YouTubers,
Yeah.
social media, connecting with people who have firsthand experience.
Exactly. And I think it's also important
Yeah.
to not just focus on the challenges, but also look for those positive stories.
Yeah.
Look for examples of people who have navigated cultural differences,
Right.
who have found common ground, who have had amazing adventures.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about getting a balanced perspective.
I love that. It's so easy to focus on the negative, like the what ifs and all that.
Yeah.
But finding those positive stories like gives you a bit more confidence
Yeah,
going into it.
for sure.
Okay, so what else can people do?
Learn some basic phrases in the local language.
Oh, of course.
Like just simple things like hello thank you, please. Those go a long way in showing respect.
Oh my gosh, yes. Just those 3 phrases before I go anywhere.
Exactly.
It's amazing how much it can add. Like, really?
It shows that you're making an effort, and people really appreciate that.
Totally.
And I think also being mindful of your surroundings and trying to blend in as much as possible, especially in areas where you might stand out.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean you have to suppress your identity or anything.
Gotcha.
It's just about
being respectful.
Being respectful and being aware of those local customs and norms.
Yeah. So maybe look into local dress codes or...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you encounter any uncomfortable situations, don't be afraid to assert yourself.
Yes.
You know, you have the right to speak up.
Right.
Remove yourself from the situation.
Yeah.
Or seek assistance.
Absolutely. Like, you don't need to tolerate anything that makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Don't save, right?
Yeah.
Like, trust your instincts. Put your well-being first.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, travel's a learning experience, right? So embrace those opportunities to learn from different cultures.
Yeah.
Challenge your own assumptions.
Totally.
Broaden your understanding of the world.
I love that.
Yeah, it's not just about ticking things off a checklist.
Yeah.
It's about growing as a person.
Exactly.
So much more than that.
For sure. And I think sometimes those unexpected moments of human connection are some of the most rewarding experiences you can have when you travel.
I totally agree, yeah. It doesn't matter where you are, it's that connection that you make.
Yeah.
So if you're listening and you're a Black traveler and you're thinking about visiting any of these places, don't let these challenges discourage you.
Totally.
Do your research, prepare yourself, and approach your trip with an open heart and mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. It's just about, like, going in informed, respectful, and open to the experience.
Yeah, and, you know, travel is all about those experiences, even the unexpected ones.
Totally. Yeah, those are sometimes the best ones. So as we wrap up this deep dive into these 10 countries, I think it's super important to say again, this was not about creating a do not travel list.
No, not at all.
It was not meant to scare anybody off from exploring the world.
It was more about sparking that conversation.
Yeah.
And encouraging thoughtful decision making.
Right.
Especially for Black travelers who may encounter unique challenges.
Absolutely. It's about giving you the tools and knowledge to navigate different cultural landscapes.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's about connecting with the world, right?
For sure.
Experiencing new cultures.
Yeah.
And expanding our horizons.
It really is.
So given all that we've talked about, what's one final thought you want to leave our listener with? Something to think about as they're planning their next adventure.
I would just ask them to think about how they can use travel as a tool.
Okay.
For not just visiting a destination, but really engaging with it.
Yeah.
How can we use travel for personal growth?
Yeah.
For cultural exchange? For building bridges of understanding between people?
It's a powerful question.
Yeah.
And one that we can all explore as we journey through this world right now.
For sure.
It's about embracing the unknown with open hearts and minds.
Absolutely.
Safe travels, everybody.
Safe travels.